Many people argue that since death from overdose is not common, amphetamines is they say that they're a relatively safe drug. But as we've seen, short-term use can cause really unpleasant side effects and social problems with people losing their jobs due to the effects of the drugs. Long-term use can have more serious consequences like psychiatric problems, severe depression, psychosis, etc. And if people become dependent on a drug, it can be really difficult for them to stop using it, even if they're not quote unquote addicted in the medical sense. So, if their use continues, these unpleasant side effects are obviously going to continue and they might get worse. So, therefore, it's important for dependent users to recognize that their amphetamine use is damaging their lives. They're going to need to get help to reduce their use, to reduce the risks to their health, and hopefully eventually stop using the drug altogether. So, one of the first signs that somebody's using drugs is that they're going to start to behave differently. So, this might include hanging out with a different group of people, taking less interest in their appearance, in their family, or in their school or their work. And people who are using amphetamines or other stimulants are often restless and jumpy or fidgety. They might start to talk really quickly. They're going to be irritable, aggressive, and they might seem nervous or anxious. They also tend to have a poor appetite, and this is soon going to lead to weight loss, and they're often going to be unable to sleep. So, periods of sleeplessness are often followed by long periods of unusual fatigue and tiredness. So, this is going to maybe cause the person to sleep for long periods, including during the day. Friends look out for each other and they're good at noticing if someone is behaving differently from normal or if something might be wrong. So, their friends are probably going to be one of the first people to kind of notice what's going on with them. So, Lucy, age 16, she said, I started using speed to get through my exams, but I really loved the buzz and I got into doing it on the weekends for parties and stuff. Most of my friends stuck to the weekends, but I got used to feeling wide awake and full of energy, and I started doing it more and more often. And in the end, it was almost every day. The only days I didn't use it was when I was sleeping it off. But I didn't realize how it was changing my personality. I'd started to get irritable and moody, snapping at everybody, accusing them of talking about me behind my back. One day, my little sister Holly, she's only 7, she was dancing around, like most kids do, singing some song and giggling, and I shouted at her for making too much noise. But she just kept going, so I hit her. I slapped her in the face so hard that it left a mark. I'll never forget how she cried. My boyfriend Adam said he'd had enough. He said either I stopped using speed altogether or it was over between us. And he persuaded me to tell my parents, and with their help and his, I stopped using it. It was hard for the first few weeks, like breaking any habit, and I felt really down and wiped out, but I got over it, and I think Holly's forgiven me. So sometimes it's largely a question of looking at why the person started using drugs in the first place and why that use has gotten out of control. So, for example, if people started using amphetamines to stay awake all night for a party and then continued because they liked the full of energy feeling that's associated with the drug, then maybe they could look at other ways of boosting their energy, like by changing their diet or just simply getting more sleep. But if people's amphetamine use is linked with other problem areas in their lives, like depression or problems with relationships or housing, or if their amphetamine use is, particularly heavy or dangerous, as is the case of someone who's injecting the drug, they should probably seek professional help. Family doctors could be able to advise about the possible courses of action, or maybe they might go to a local drug advice service and become aware of what help is available in the area. I know in our area they have navigate recovery. It used to be Face It Together Gwinnett, in Gwinnett County in Georgia. And this is kind of like a hub of information for substance use. So a user might go there and then they would be linked with all the different services that might be available to them. So treatment for amphetamine dependence is not as well developed as treatment for addiction to some of the other drugs like heroin. And this is just because there's a considerable debate about whether amphetamines are truly addictive. But it's widely suggested that stronger forms of the drug, like methamphetamines, are highly addictive, especially when they're injected. And a lot of professionals working in the field are eager to improve support and treatment services for the people who are affected. There's very little evidence of the effectiveness or otherwise of the treatments that are currently available. But one controversial form of treatment is to prescribe low doses of amphetamines for problem users. This means that although their amphetamine use is continuing, the amount and the purity of what they're using is going to be controlled. It's going to make overdose much less likely and hopefully reduce their dependence. Some people argue that prescribing amphetamines is unethical because of the risk of the person developing psychosis due to its long term use. But the results from the current studies are encouraging, and these studies show that this approach is going to attract a lot of users into treatment and reduce the levels of injecting and needle sharing. And some experts suggest that the prescription for amphetamines, it can be seen as the carrot that entices amphetamine users through the door of the treatment center. And they're going to argue that if the chance of being given this drug makes people come forward, then this is a major step in reaching a group of problem drug users who, at the moment, they don't see a point in attending treatment agencies because there is so little help that's available. And since amphetamine users are the second largest group of people who regularly inject drugs, this is after heroin users, it's going to be important that the practice of needle sharing is addressed and, if possible, reduced. And then another way of treating amphetamine dependency is to prescribe antidepressants. This is often combined with counseling. So, this might help to address the issues that led the person to become a problem drug user in the first place. And one of the reasons people become addicted or dependent is that amphetamines are going to increase the levels of the brain chemicals responsible for mood and the feeling of well being. So when that person comes down from the amphetamine high, the levels of those chemicals are going to fall dramatically, and this is going to cause that user to feel low or depressed. So antidepressants can help balance that brain chemistry and remove what the user sees as kind of a need for more amphetamines. So this is from Paul, a social worker. He said, I've worked with speed addicts for years. It makes me really angry when people say that since it's not addictive, it's not dangerous. They should see some of the poor people that I've had to deal with. Even if it's not addictive in the same way that heroin is, it can still do serious damage to somebody's life. But no one seems to be doing anything about the problem. Heroin addicts are prescribed substitutes to help them get off of it, but the idea that we could do the same thing for speed addicts is frowned upon. Injecting is becoming more and more common, and you're even getting ex heroin users moving to speed because it's so much easier to get a hold of. The trouble is, if they start shooting up, they're as likely to die of AIDS or something as they were when they were still using heroin. There are plenty of needle exchanges around, but they seem to only target heroin users. Everyone's heard of heroin. Everyone knows it can kill you. But ask people about amphetamines, and they'll tell you that it was a 60s drug, and they've often never even heard of people injecting it. We've got to get that message out there that amphetamine use is still widespread and it's still causing problems. Needle exchange programs can reduce the risk of harm to injecting users. So in the United Kingdom, most of the programs are publicly funded, but in the United States, this is going to vary from state to state. And these programs work by offering users sterile syringes and needles which they return for disposal after they've used them in exchange for new ones. So this is going to reduce the risk of infectious diseases like spreading HIV, hepatitis, other bloodborne infections. And these needle exchange programs, they might offer advice and counseling on drug problems and also other health or social or welfare issues. So these programs, they're a good way of getting information to drug users about the treatment and services that are available out there. And at this time, the main users of the programs are heroin addicts, largely because they're the largest groups of people who are injecting drugs. But also because many injecting amphetamine users are unaware that such programs can help them. So people argue that providing clean needles in this way increases the intravenous drug use, but there's very little evidence to support that. Research from several countries suggests that the programs are effective and that they can significantly reduce any risky behavior. So, amphetamine use does considerable damage to people's health, their wealth, their career plans, their relationships. Perhaps one of the best approaches to dealing with the problem is to focus on education so that more people understand the facts about the drug, in particular, its potential for harm. It's especially important for young people to know about amphetamine since they're most likely going to be the ones that are going to come into contact with this drug. So, by arming ourselves with knowledge about amphetamine use and its dangers, and through open and honest discussion, maybe we can help to inform and protect our friends, our colleagues, or future generations from this destructive, yet all too common drug. So, it can be helpful to share ideas and opinions about drugs, which brings that subject into the open. So, having our clients have open conversations with their friends is really going to help spread the information that is needed out there.